Happy New Year. Jack Carr checking in. And before we get to January's reading list, just wanted to wish everybody a Happy New Year and hope everyone had a safe one, a great holiday, and is now charging into 2020. Awesome. A couple things to talk about before we get to the January reading list. First one, SHOT Show schedule coming out soon. That should be up in a couple days here, or in this newsletter. And I'm kicking it off with Kyle Lamb at the SIG booth at 9 a.m. on Tuesday. So anybody going to SHOT Show, you want to say hi to me, to Kyle, stop by and say hello. And if you don't know who Kyle Lamb is, an amazing guy, incredible patriot, spent a lot of his time in the military at the highest levels of special operations that one could ever possibly operate at. And he made a thing called a VTAC sling. And we were talking the other day, and he actually developed it in 1999. And I think got it on the market in about 2003 timeframe. And I discovered it in, I think, 2007. But after I used that once, that was my sling of choice going forward. So it's super cool to have used something that he developed and to now be buddies and be talking about it and hanging out. So stop by to say hello. He also, very cool, gave me this knife, which is aptly called the Patriot. So pretty sweet little blade right here. And I know there are more interesting things like that in the works. He also has a few books, Leadership in the Shadows, and I love this when this one came out. Green Eyes and Black Rifles. So it was just a sweet cover and sweet title. So when this thing came out, I think I got my hands on it in about 2008 or 9 or something, but super cool. And then Stay in the Fight. So anybody that's a student of weapons craft, which is probably most people watching this, pick these up. These need to be in the library for sure. So Kyle, thanks so much for everything, man. And I am fired up to do a podcast with you at SIG on Tuesday of SHOT Show. I've got a lot of questions about the Jack Carr collection merchandise, all profits of which go to veteran-focused foundations. So those will be back up on the site. I think the coffee cups are up now. All the other stuff will be back up there soon, and I'll make an announcement about that. So what else is going on here? Oh, always got to talk about blades because I love blades. This Asher Knives, thank you again. I know I've talked about this before. He makes a sweet little tomahawk too that I've been working with, which I absolutely love. So check him out for sure. There's plenty of links and pictures on my Instagram if you need to figure out how to find him. So I got a really cool Christmas present this year. I dropped hints for the last couple years, and then my wife picked up on those hints. So she got me these sweet skis, Icelandic skis. And as you can tell in the video there, it's a 10th Mountain Division guy, and 15% of the proceeds go to the 10th Mountain Division Foundation, which is so cool. And if you don't know anything about the 10th Mountain Division, check out their history. It's fascinating. And one of the guys that came back from World War II in the 10th Mountain Division, he was one of the 2 guys that ended up starting Vail. And a lot of those guys, a lot of those veterans that came back from that time frame, they ended up really setting up the U.S. ski industry as we know it today. I got to talk to a former ski patrol over the weekend about the history, which is just fascinating. So super cool. I'm gonna get some bindings on these planks here and be using them on the mountain here shortly. When I'm out skiing about, I often get questions about my poles. So these things are sole poles, and they are made of bamboo and recycled plastics, and you can choose your color. So I tried to go with a hunter orangish on this thing here, but sole poles, kind of cool. And what else do we have? Oh, I always wanted to put a ski patrol into one of my novels. So it didn't make it into novel 3 like I thought it was going to, but in the future, there's a ski patrol type person going in. And I think it's because early on in life, I read this, Mission MIA, J.C. Pollock. This is my original copy from the early 80s. And man, this thing was awesome. But the protagonist in this is a former Special Forces guy, gets back from Vietnam and is working in Aspen as a ski instructor. And then I'll let you can pick it up and find out the rest of the story from there. But super cool book, very influential on me, as was this author, which probably made me want to use a ski patrol ski instructor type in my future novels. And in talking about it this weekend, I found out that a lot of guys that came back from Vietnam ended up going into into ski patrol because they had that background in combat medicine, and a lot of them went to places like Aspen and Vail and Park City and into Montana, places like that. So there's some crazy stories from the late '60s, early '70s, up into the mid '80s of these guys before these ski towns really started booming and taking off and became what they are today. And a few of those stories are definitely going to make it into future novels. It's just too cool. Let's see what else is going on. All right, let's talk some books. I love talking books. So for those of you new to this or watching it for the first time, every month I pick 6 books that were influential to me along my path. And some of them will come from a reading list I put together for the Naval Special Warfare Center before I got out of the SEAL teams. And some of them will just be books that I picked up along the way that influenced me in some way, shape, or form. So January 6th are out. They're on the website. More information on the website, on the blog, but I'll run through them a little bit right here. And first one, Killer Angels. So this is must reading for anybody going into the military, anyone with an interest in the Civil War. If you're intimidated by studying the Civil War, just really want to test the waters, get into it, aren't sure where to start, this is where you start. Killer Angels, Michael Shaara, I think that's how you pronounce it. This is an amazing novel, written in 1974. It won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction in 1975, and the movie Gettysburg was based on this, and it's the story of the Battle of Gettysburg. But there's no novel that I have read, no book that I have read that humanizes war in the way that this one does right here. It's absolutely incredible. Pick this book up or read this book, think about it, and yeah, it's weird to say enjoy a novel like this, but it's absolutely fascinating. And I want to read one section from it here as I was picking this up. I hadn't read it for a few years, but there was a page folded down when I pulled it off my shelf, and I went to it, and I know why it was folded down when I folded it down all those years ago. And this is General Lee and James Longstreet. And it reads, "Far back in the woods, there was still fog in the trees, caught in the branches like fragments of white summer. And Lee remembered, 'Bow down thy heavens, O Lord, and come down, touch the mountains, and they shall smoke.' He closed his eyes. 'Blessed be the Lord my strength, which teacheth my fingers to fight and my hands to war. Amen.' They rode several miles before they heard the first thunder. Lee reined to a stop. Silence. Motion of ragged white clouds. He said, 'Do you hear that?' Longstreet, who was slightly deaf, shook his head. It might have been thunder, but Lee waited. Then it came, low, distant thumping, ominous, angry. Longstreet said grimly, bright eyes angered, 'I don't hear too well anymore.' 'That was artillery,' Lee said. Longstreet gazed at him with black maple eyes. 'And don't think,' Lee began, then stopped. 'I'd better ride forward,' he said. Longstreet nodded. Lee looked at his watch. Not quite 10 in the morning. He left Longstreet and rode toward the sound of the guns. So I flipped down that page because we've been talking in the SEAL teams about running to the sound of the guns, and those that phrase really speaks to. So that's why that passage really spoke to me. So pick this up, Killer Angels, not to be missed. All right, Brotherhood of the Rose. David Morrell fans out there, I know you guys know what I'm talking about here. Brotherhood of the Rose, amazing novel. I discovered this probably a couple years after it was written. I probably discovered it about 1985, and it is the first novel that I read that mentions SEALs. I think Clive Cussler had mentioned them in Raise the Titanic, but I didn't read that until later. So this is the first mention of SEALs in a fictional thriller that I read, and the passage that has SEALs in it was one of the reasons that I became a SEAL and that I focused on that. It really cemented to me that I was on the right path. And now that I've become friends with David Morrell, what an amazing guy, absolutely incredible. Pick this book up, Brotherhood of the Rose. It's fascinating. It's part of a trilogy. The Fraternity of the Stone, League of Night and Fog are the ones that come next. And this is a signed first edition. So I think I have almost every David Morrell book signed first edition now. So there might be one or two that I'm missing, but it's very close. So I feel honored to have them in my collection as well. So check this out. It was the first, I don't know if it's the first novel, but it was David's vision was to combine the best elements of really English literary spy tradition and U.S. thriller spy tradition and combine them into one novel. And he succeeded, really changed the genre with this novel. And enjoy it, have a good time with it, and one of my favorites. One of the guys in there, actually, Elliot, for those that have read it, he was based on a real life character in the CIA, James Jesus Angleton. Jim Harrison. Who's read Jim Harrison out there? Amazing. A poet, essayist, novelist. He wrote Legends of the Fall, Revenge, and those two are both included in this trilogy of novellas right here. So not quite a short story, not quite a novel. And of course, Legends of the Fall later became the movie with Brad Pitt. Revenge became the movie with Kevin Costner. And it'd be hard to find a book that has more hauntingly beautiful prose than this or any of Jim Harrison's stuff. So pick this up, give it a read, and enjoy. Put down the digital stuff first, though. I recommend pouring a drink, lighting a fire, and settling back in to just engross yourself in the pages of these words. So, okay, what else do we have here? David Kilcullen. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm a big fan of David Kilcullen, Dr. David Kilcullen, who I found out about him first in Iraq, I think in around 2005, 2006 timeframe, when our senior level leadership was reluctant to call what we were facing an insurgency. And David Kilcullen is a former Australian Army officer, became Condoleezza Rice's counterinsurgency advisor at the State Department, and was David Petraeus's advisor for the surge in Iraq. And there are few people out there, probably none, that think at the tactical, the operational, and the strategic level when it comes to countering an insurgency, to terrorism, and anybody going into the military, anybody interested in those things. Any policymakers need to read this book and his follow-on books as well, Out of the Mountains, Blood Year, and Counterinsurgency. But this is a great one to start with, and I'm definitely proud to call Dave a friend. So thanks for everything. All right, If, Rudyard Kipling. So most people are familiar with the poem If, and to me, it's one of the most powerful pieces of poetry ever written. And it's especially a couple lines from If. And when all those about you are losing their heads and blaming it on you, and to fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. So every single one of the words in this poem is really a jewel, is meaningful. Pick this one up and check it out. Jocko did an amazing podcast on it as well. If you want to go back in the archives and hear Jocko read it, which is a treat, and then get his analysis of it, is pretty cool to do. So pick this up and share the poem with your family and your children as well. And I want to finish up with Stephen King on writing. So I get asked a lot about what books I read about the writing process, about how to get published. And I didn't really read very many of them because I think that you can read too much about how to do something. And eventually you've actually got to sit down and do it. But there were a few that I read, and this was one of them. And it's more memoir than anything else, which I think is more helpful. It's inspirational, and I read it once, so I didn't keep going back to it, but then I put it with a few select others right on my desk as I was writing my first novel. And just having it that close helped inspire, I guess. It was just nice knowing that it was that close. So don't spend too much time worrying about agents and publishers and all the rest of it. Make your book the best it can possibly be before you start worrying about that sort of thing. And don't study about how to do it too much. Maybe a couple things, this book being one, and then sit down and put pen to paper, put fingers to the keyboard, and make that thing as good as you can possibly make it. So check this out and then get to work. And that is it for now. Thank you guys for joining me. I appreciate it. And gotta have this. This helps me think, especially when I'm writing. So I like to have my Winkler Tomahawk close at hand. Of course, this is the Tomahawk that James Reese uses in The Terminal List and in True Believer and in the upcoming Savage Son. So if you don't have one of these, you probably need to get one. All right. Thanks so much. Take care. Happy New Year. See you at SHOT.